is Stan, and I'm pretty much happy and excited to be here just to speak a word into someone else's life.
Is that the mark of a true believer is the ability to tell someone else about Jesus. The reason why you are saved is such that you may be able to serve others. You were saved. That condemnation is an instrument that is used by the devil in order to derail the people from their God-given destinies. Condemnation is an instrument that is used by the devil. And he uses this instrument quite well in order to derail you from your God-given destiny.
He's a great and a mighty God. And one thing that makes him a great God is that he's a God who cares. You see, if somebody cares, what they do is they meet the need before somebody even asks.
Hello folks, how you doing? Great, my name is Stan, and I'm pretty much happy and excited to be here just to speak a word into someone else's life. Today I just want to talk about how God uses the most unlikely people to do extraordinary things on planet Earth. God uses the most unlikely people in order to do extraordinary things on planet Earth. See, God is not looking for perfect people. God is not looking for people that have it all together in order for Him to use them. No, God uses the most unlikely people. You're probably looking at yourself right now and you've disqualified yourself already. You just don't think that God can use you. But one thing I need you to understand is that God is a respecter of no persons. God does not respect anybody. God uses just about anybody. As long as you're willing to be used, God will use you. The only thing that you have to say is you have to answer. You have to say, yes, Lord, I am here. You can use me. God can use anybody to do just about anything. See, God can use me. God can use you. Let's look at a story in the Bible, the story of a man by the name Gideon. Gideon. He was the least in his family. I mean, in his own eyes, he never considered himself someone that God could use. But guess what? God used him. Why? Because God is in the business of using the most unlikely people. God is in the business of using the most unlikely people. You need to begin to look at yourself as a candidate that God can use for His glory. Because that is nothing but the honest truth that God can use just about anybody as long as you agree and you say, Lord, here I am, you can use me. Somebody needs to make a wise decision today and make a choice to be used of God. Whether you know it or not, either way you're being used. It's either you're being used by God or you're being used by the devil. So you have to make a decision where you don't just ignorantly live life and be continually used by another element. You can be used either by God or the devil. You choose who uses you. And I've made a choice to be used of God. It's a decision. You just have to make a choice to say, I am going to be used of God. And that is the wisest decision that anybody could ever make in their entire life. I want you to look at Moses, a stutterer, a person who could not talk. And guess what God does? God decides to use a stutterer in order to deliver His children out of captivity. See, I don't know what your weakness is. I don't know what your shortcomings are. See, I don't know what is that thing that you're not so good at. God is saying, I don't care about things that you're not so good at. I can still use you regardless. I can still use you regardless. Looking at Gideon, he looked down upon himself, but God chose to use him anyway. And I just want to talk to somebody right now to say God uses the most unlikely people to do His will. You see, you need to understand that God will use the despised things of this world in order to confound the wisdom of the wise. When the world is thinking this is what God is going to do, God does exactly the opposite. When the world is saying this, God is also saying something else. Why? Because generally the way the world thinks is totally different from the way from the way that God thinks. The way the world would do things is totally different from the way that God would do things. So one thing I need you to take home tonight is that God uses the most unlikely people in order to do His will. Do you consider yourself the most unlikely person that God can possibly use? Then I need you to know that you're the candidate that God is about to use in this season for His glory. The only thing that you have to do is to say, "Here I am, Lord, you can use me." Let's look at another character. Let's look at Moses again. I know I mentioned him earlier. Let's look at him again. You see, Moses was a murderer. Oh, yeah, he was a murderer. See, Moses killed an Egyptian, and he went on the run from the Pharaoh. And guess what God does? God calls a man who is a murderer to go and deliver his people out of captivity. God uses the most unlikely people in order to do His work. Number one, the guy was a stutterer. That's even bad enough. The guy can't talk. Number two, the guy killed somebody in Egypt. That simply means that if he's to go back to Egypt, he can hardly even stand and defend himself. But God uses the most unlikely people in order to do His work. Maybe another person that we can look at is King David. King David was forgotten by his own father. Imagine having been forgotten by your very own father. King David had been forgotten by his very own dad. But God chooses to use King David for His glory. Oh, glorious. How glorious. God chooses King David, a young man who had been forgotten. Imagine Jesse comes to the house, and when he gets to the house, he sees David's elder brother. And as far as he's concerned, that is the man that God is about to use. But God says, "No, that's not the man that I'm about to use. I'm not about to use that guy. I rejected that guy." And Jesse calls all his sons. And then he forgets that he is a son by the name David, who's out in the field taking care of sheep. And yet David is the man that God had called, a man that God wanted to use. God uses the most unlikely people. God uses the forgotten people. People that have been forgotten. You probably come from a family, and in this particular family, they do things without even consulting you. They don't even consult you for anything. You only get to see events. You only get to see things happening. You're always caught unaware, and you always find yourself surprised by events. You're not even consulted for anything, but guess what? You're the candidate that God is about to use in this season to do an extraordinary thing in your lifetime. God can use you for His glory. The only thing that you have